So I'm Brian. I am a graphics editor at National Geographic Magazine, and I create and envision interactive editorial experiences. And a graphics editor, just for those uninitiated to that title, it's a pretty catch-all term. But generally, people in my department and at other newsrooms who do this kind of thing, and other media companies, we take science topics, try to make them more approachable and usable to a general audience. And I use design, visualization, code, and because that's my background. But other people in the department are illustrators, kind of visionaries who are art directors that tell other illustrators what to do, or hire cartographers, or it really runs the gamut. But so today I'm going to talk about one project that I worked on that came out in February 2018 this year, and it's a combination of animated maps, graphics, satellite imagery, audio, text, and photography, and it's all about how birds migrate. So if you stay at National Geographic long enough, you will probably work on a migration project, whether it's human or animal. And I worked on an elk migration project a few years ago, and I vowed not to make the same mistakes that I did in that project. Kind of UI problems that I ran into making interactive projects on the web. But so National Geographic has a long history of migration maps. I went back into the map archive and found this one from 1911, April 1911 magazine issue, and the caption is map showing the principal routes used by birds in their migration between North and South America. So some basic flyways. We had a rough understanding about that this is what birds were doing. Not entirely sure what birds or exactly, but okay, 1911. Let's fast forward to 1979. This is the flyways in the Western Hemisphere, flyways being the kind of interstate system that birds take between or within continents. And it includes illustrations of what these birds are. This kind of reflects the knowledge of the science at the time. Jump to 2004, similar map, same concept, but now we have the other side of the world, also with illustrations, updated, modern, with kind of design trends at the time. So then, let's jump to 2018. This is the year of the bird, and taking these previous maps, kind of an homage to the style. This map was by Lauren James and Fernando Bautista for illustrations, and this was a ton of research, and it took quite a long time to do. And so, it's a poster about this size. It is exactly this size. And so the question is, how do I get this huge, super detailed, beautiful map to work on phones? Vastly different dimensions. And actually, I feel like that's the wrong question. I feel like the better question is, what's the best expression of the topic for the browsers, for a totally different medium? And so kind of the short answer was, I didn't use a lot of what was in that poster. And it's kind of a shame because it's beautiful, but I felt like shoehorning all of that into a phone would maybe do even a disservice to that poster, because it's not respecting the vision of it and also the topic. So I took a different approach. But ultimately, what I did use from the poster were those flyways. And I recolored them for use on a dark background and atop NASA's night lights as well. So what is this project? As you get to the website, and as you scroll down the page, you get an intro of an animated Earth and seeing a broad-winged hawk fly through that same time period to kind of set up this dramatic intro about where birds traveling. And then I'm setting up the flyways, the risks that birds take as they go through our terrain, and then the concept of the green wave. So birds will follow insects, which kind of are following the vegetation as seasons change. So setting up this main concept, then I dive into 7 different species. And for each species, I'm visualizing, as well as photography and audio of birdsong, I'm also visualizing the entire species distribution and where the species goes at particular times of year. So you can kind of scroll through it at a glance, and if you really care, then you can click on the buttons and you kind of get an annotated tour through where these birds are going. And with text by a expert ornithologist, Marshall Iliff, but then I'll talk about that more. So then I repeat the pattern for 6 more birds after that at various parts. You'll notice that this is just the Western Hemisphere because this kind of data doesn't really exist for the Eastern Hemisphere. So this is a pretty interdisciplinary project, design, development, data processing, compilation of various map layers, cartography of said map layers, and audio. So these are generally the tools that I use to make a project like this. I'm not going to dig too deep into it because I'm going to kind of go through each category. So what informs the design is the data that kind of defines what this project is. And so we knew that this data existed. So this is a model of bird abundance for a number of species across a year. So this is one species, this is the wood thrush. And the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and their EBird project had done this visualization. And this is a model, and I'll talk about what that is exactly. But basically every pixel is, if you were walking around at 7 a.m., it describes how many birds you would see at that point. So the density, you'd see more birds of that species. So eBird is a crowdsourced website. If you've ever seen it or been to it, if you're a bird watcher, and you've seen a bird in the wild, you can go to the website and describe what bird that was and where you saw it. So that's great, but that really describes where bird watchers go. It doesn't describe where the birds go necessarily. It's a representative in a certain sense. So with this STEM modeling that the Cornell lab did, basically is filling in the gaps. It's combining these crowdsourced locations with satellite imagery and satellite imagery analysis and habitat information to fill the gaps to kind of paint a complete picture. So once I knew what this data was, that I consulted with the bird expert Marshall that I talked about, of what constituted better data within that data set, because there's hundreds of species, and we wanted to pick birds that represented distinct migration strategies as well as different geographies that they cover. So that's 3-pronged: the data, the geography, the patterns. And then that kind of informed the initial designs that I made for this project. And this is like really rough mobile design. 60%, at least 60% of our traffic comes from phones, so I had to make sure that that is going to work. So this is really helpful to describe what's going to happen in the project to managers and other people in the company. Not terribly helpful in terms of animations. I'm a firm believer in interactive prototyping and just kind of rough drafts to kind of show basically kind of mock-ups, interactive mock-ups to express where I'm going with the project. One thing that this project has in common is a lot of animated maps. On the left, this is the Earth animated from GOES 16 data and satellite image. On the right is those migration maps I was talking about. And what I do is similar, if you were here for Practical Cartography Day, similar to what Josh Stevens was talking about with bash scripts. I'm basically doing a lot of scripts within Python, which it's kind of, pick your poison, basically. So I didn't want to use ArcGIS QGIS and a combination of After Effects to compile these videos, because I wanted it in like a single environment. I wanted to be able to run one command or a series of commands to run my process over and over, tweak my colors, tweak my settings, hit a button, tweak my settings, hit a button, and do that on thousands of frames, processing each image at a time, and then compiling it into a video, automating that process, because there's just too much to do manually. So what does that script do exactly? This is one, on the left, one of 52 frames, and that's 1 week of migration abundance for the Western Tanager. And it was delivered in a GeoTIFF, and this is sinusoidal projection. That's kind of what came out of the box in that GeoTIFF that Cornell was working with. And this is a 32-bit file, and I'm basically saying that because you can't just throw a 32-bit file on the web. You have to transform it, and you have to apply a color ramp in a way that is that you have control over. 32-bit gives you a lot of flexibility for scientific analysis. It gives you more precision to do stuff to it, but you just need to be aware of it when working with it for web presentation, and print for that matter. So I'm using gdal.info to inspect the file, to see what's in there, to look at the metadata, and then I'm using Mapbox's Rasterio to do my transformation steps, kind of like the GDAL transform that Josh was talking about. So these are all 52 frames of that raw data, and I want to do a series of things. I want to reproject each frame. I want to crop each frame to a uniform extent. I want to apply a color ramp. I want to composite it with a base map. I want to create a video, and then I want to add labels. And I want to repeat this for 6 other species. So there's a base map on the left, a little light on that screen. But I'm working in Illustrator for that base map on the left in Map Publisher, and I'm visually like creating a base map for myself. And I don't want to work in coordinates. I don't want to like type coordinates into my script. I want to visually see what I'm going to get, and I basically use that file as a template for my processing. So my scripts look at a visual file, and it converts all of my other data according to that template. And that's really nice because I can tweak the file and then see the output and repeat and repeat and repeat and iterate to get the result that I'm interested in. Here's all 52 frames. They're now colored. They're now projected. And then next step is to add the base map. So that was one set of 52 images. Now this is another set of 52 images composited with ImageMagick, which is the Photoshop of the command line. Super powerful. It's 30 years old, but it can do a lot. I'm also adding a vignette effect on each frame. So then, from all those images, it dumps out a folder of images, and I compile that into a movie using another command line tool, FFmpeg, another 20-year-old tool. From there, I didn't want to add labels. So this is a horrible looking map, but what it represents is all the labels in each of my steps on the web view. So as you click, it's basically, I'm hiding all these labels when I get this on the web, and then as I click, I'm turning on a set of labels sequentially. I get these labels to the browser with AI to HTML, AI number 2 HTML, which is a New York Times tool that they made to convert your Illustrator files to the web, and it's great. So then I match this up with the video in the browser and make a map sandwich, as was discussed before. That came up. Video on the bottom, a layer of SVG for my leader lines, and then HTML labels on top. So there you go. So when you click, it turns on things on and off. All these labels were a ton of work because 7 species and 5 steps per each species. So that's, you do the math, 35 maps, a lot of hand stuff. All right. I'm just going to switch gears. I'm running out of time here. So this is the GOES 16 imagery with a GPS track of a bird traveling over it. And I wanted to, it's a video on the bottom, and on top I have a D3 kind of animated SVG, animated in step with the video and aligned in time. So GOES 16 is kind of an amazing satellite. It's geosynchronous. It gives you a full disk of the Earth every 15 seconds. And it's also called GOES East, as it is more operational these days. It's a weather satellite. It gives you infrared bands and visible bands. I was interested in the visible. So because I'm interested in the visible, if you combine various wavelengths of light into RGB channels, you can get something like this. And you can see the clouds in the dark because I'm using an infrared band at night to make those show. So same deal as before. I take that full disk, I georeference it, or I reproject it and crop it into the area that I'm interested in. And then knowing that information, knowing how it's registered, I can overlay stuff like D3 SVGs within the browser in the a cleaner way possible than embedding it within the video itself. And what is that line? That is Patty the bird. And knowing that GOES data existed from June 2017 onward, that kind of informed what data I could find that would work to do that kind of visualization. So I went to movebank.org and I found some data that seemed like it would align, that was one of my species of interest. I contacted the organization, Hawk Mountain, and they gladly provided the data, which was great. And oh, this is yesterday. It's migrating right now, and it's in Costa Rica, about to pass into Panama. So that's exciting. But yeah, I mean, GPS data is messy, so I needed to do a series of steps to generalize it, clean it up, and make it better align with the GOES data. I won't talk about this, but another kind of video processing step to get this green wave animation. If you're interested in this kind of process or other types of projects like this, I've written articles about this, that many thousand word articles, deep dives into this, so you can get all the nitty-gritty, even nerdier details than I got into today. And also, in a more polished version of this is going into cartographic perspectives shortly, so check that out. And if you like writing stuff like this, talk to Sarah Bell, and they would love to get your process as well. So thank you very much.